Hi, welcome. Thanks for tuning in. Today I have two cards featuring two new stamp sets from Blue Knight Rubber Stamps. One stamp set is called Music Notes and the other one is called Sheet Music. Sheet Music is on the left, it's horizontal on the page, and Music Notes is on the right. It has two quotes. One says, "Where words fail, music speaks." Hans Christian Andersen. And then music is the universal language of mankind, as well as several different types of music notes and a large and small treble clef. Now for my first card, I did not videotape it, but I wanted to share with you the components that I used to create it. First, I started with the silhouette swans. I used the large cattail and the large swan set, the two swans together. And I used the Music Notes stamp set as well as the Night Sky 2 paper. And I used the one that has the smaller moon in the scene in the middle. And that's the paper that I used. It was a very simple card to create. I just stamped the music notes and this quote, "Where words fail, music speaks." So that card is relatively simple. I created it off camera. Let's go ahead and look at how I created the card that uses vellum and heat embossing on vellum. I think that's something that could be of interest to some of you to learn some techniques around that process. Okay, so I've got my stamping platform and I have a piece of heat resistant acetate. Now, this was something that a friend of mine gave me. I don't have a source for it, but I'll look if I can find one. I'll put it in the description box below. I'll have in the description box below the different products that I use. Now, first I stamped it. This was archival ink, which is black, and it was nice, but I was looking for something a little bit more subtle. So after I stamped it this way with the archival ink, which you'll see here in a minute how nicely this turns out, I decided that I wanted something more a little bit antique looking. So I switched and I grabbed a piece of cream or ivory color paper and I stamped the sheet music twice. I figured I can cut this out and use it for two different card bases. This will come into play later in my card making process. Now I do have StazOn ink in this brown color. So what I'm going to do is stamp the treble clef and the quote, "Where words fail, music speaks," and some music notes on a piece of heat resistant vellum. And if you don't have StazOn that's colored, you could just use the black. So these are the different tools that I grabbed from my supply. I have clear embossing powder. I have embossing powder, anti-static powder brush. I've already positioned my stamps on my MISTI. Now I'm going to use my anti-static brush. I'm going to brush this across the vellum. This will help prevent any smudges or fingerprints or general things being heat embossed that you don't want to be heat embossed, like a stray fingerprint or something. And then I'm going to go ahead and stamp this with my StazOn. This StazOn, this brown color, is called Ganache, and it is fast drying solvent ink. So I'm working quickly here, trying to stamp this and then doing the heat embossing so that the ink is wet enough to grab that embossing powder. My embossing powder is clear and it is from Pink and Main. I'm using the Pink and Main Detail Clear Embossing Powder. And I'm just gently rubbing this. If you press too hard, you risk making your stamped images look a little bit smushed. And so I am trying to clean my stamps quickly. Now, StazOn will stain your stamps, so if you don't like that, you might want to avoid using StazOn. Doesn't matter to me because once I clean them, the ink is removed, even though the photopolymer is stained, and the stain will remain, but it does not impact the future stamping of this product. So you won't have to worry about if you're trying to stamp in, for example, red or something, that it's going to come out brown. It'll definitely be fine once you clean it with your stamp cleaner. They do make a special cleaner for StazOn, but it doesn't seem like it takes it away in every case. So I just use my regular stamp cleaner. I'm just taking a close look at this to make sure that the embossing powder stuck to the words, and I have a stiff bristle brush that I'm using to carefully remove any embossing powder that is basically coating the vellum where I don't want it to be. I have these little hands. They're super cute. They're from Ranger, but they really do protect your fingers. This type of heat embossing with vellum, the vellum, you have to be careful. The vellum does heat up very quickly, so you don't want to burn your fingers. Again, this heats up very quickly. Even though it is heat resistant, it will warp if you apply the heat too long. And this did warp a little bit at the bottom here. You can see where it warped. But in the end, I still ended up using this. I just trimmed the bottom of my panel where that warping was. And it actually turned out really nice. So it was a happy accident. And what I'm doing is I'm pulling my heat gun away and not holding it too long in one place. Because, yeah, even though it's heat resistant, you can see there where it warped. Okay, so I'm just making sure that everything is nice and embossed well. And you can't remove that warping once it's there. But in the end, I end up trimming it. But here's another one that I did off camera. It doesn't have any warping, so I'm really pleased with how this one turned out. I'm going to show you a trick on how to apply your glue so that it doesn't show. I have some art glitter glue. I have a little sponge and a little silicone mat. I'm just going to take the sponge and dip it into the glue. And you want to put a nice generous amount of glue down. And then I'm just dipping that sponge into that glue and then sponging around the four corners. I'm not trying to coat the entire back of this vellum, just the corners and the middle edges to help make sure that this stays adhered to this paper. So that's what it looks like once it's embossed, but I am going to show you a still photo of the card that I made. Here it is. I trimmed underneath that music note. I don't know what that's called. I am not into music and I don't know how to read music. But the swirly part at the bottom, I just trimmed it off, which is kind of cool because now it's like a peekaboo card. You can see the music, the sheet music behind the music notes. So this was fun, and I thought it was a good way to showcase both of the products, the music notes and the sheet music. But the focus of this week's design team is the music notes stamp set. Here's a close-up. I did matte this with brown paper behind the cream colored paper, and then I'm going to have a close-up of the one with the swans. So thank you very much for watching my video today. If you're not a subscriber, will you please subscribe? Please hit that like button and leave a comment and let me know what you think about my cards. I greatly appreciate it. Thanks everyone. Have a hopeful day. Bye-bye.